Hello everyone, this is LycanhoodReads and my name is Michaela. I'm here coming at you with an October/Spooky Reads wrap-up video for the month of October in 2021. I also want to do an end of the year tag, and depending on how long this video runs, I might just have to make that into a separate video. But if it's nice and short for this wrap-up, I will tack it on at the end. We'll just see how we're doing on time as we go. Welcome back. It's great to have you. I hope you all had an awesome October. Hope you all had an awesome happy Halloween. Today is, I believe, November 2nd, so perfect time to get into an end of the year video and wrap up those spooky reads from the last couple of months. So I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. I read 5 books in October, which is actually what my goal was for the month. I had 5 books on my TBR, but the books that I ended up reading are not the same ones that I had on my TBR necessarily. Not all of them, anyway. So I kicked off the month with Ace of Spades, which was on my October spooky TBR must-read. This was highly anticipated because I forget which month this came out, but they've been talking about it on YouTube for a while. It was a high anticipated read, and for good reason. It's a YA, horror, thriller, something like that. Spooky vibes, spooky dark academia vibes, with 2 black main characters, 2 queer black main characters. So we got LGBT rep here, and we've also got people of color, which we love to see, especially in horror. And this book was definitely being described mostly as like Gossip Girl meets Get Out, or even I would think like Pretty Little Liars meets Get Out, somewhere in that realm. It's definitely what we're dealing with, dark academia. I would call it more of a thriller than a horror book, but you know, it's all just technical, like fine line terms. So it definitely meets those expectations of Gossip Girl meets Get Out or Pretty Little Liars or whatever. It's riding those vibes real hard for sure. I have to say that I didn't enjoy it as much as I hoped. I fell victim to the hype. There was a lot of hype. I liked it. It was good for the time of year, perfect for fall, for spooky, for Halloween. But the plot wasn't quite there for me. Like, it's YA, so I'm willing to forgive a lot, just given that, but it just didn't hit all the notes that I would have liked for it to hit. And I haven't seen anyone mention that. A lot of the people that were reading it before I picked it up, you know, they were just raving about it, giving it 5 out of 5 stars, saying they loved it, which is fine. That's great. But I didn't hear anyone having the same concerns that I had with it, or same like discrepancies. So I enjoyed it. Definitely a good read for October, but I would say temper your expectations a little bit because the plot isn't all that it could be. That's what I'll say. No, the plot's not all it could be. But that was my first read of October, and it was a great start to the month. My second read of October is another YA spooky book, and it's also LGBTQ plus. It's Sapphic to be specific. So this is The Dead and the Dark by Courtney Gould, who has the perfect name for this genre. She couldn't have planned it better. And I actually really ended up loving this book. I don't tend to like doing star ratings. But if I had to rate this one, I'd give it like a 4 or 4.5, because I just really enjoyed it. It was a great reading experience, especially for the time of month, the time of year. It is a supernatural, sapphic, murder mystery thriller sort of deal. It takes place in like a small town in like remote Oregon, so you got the spooky fog, you know, Halloween vibes. I was all for it. And one of the main characters is the daughter of this gay couple that they have one of those shows, like a ghost hunting shows, you know, on like investigation or whatever. And she's their daughter. And so she's been around all this sort of paranormal stuff all her life, and she's become very skeptical of it. Doesn't necessarily believe, but doesn't quite not believe. She's just kind of oversaturated with it, essentially. And they go to this small town to investigate some spookiness, and the queen bee of the town, straight girl, pretty typical, gets involved in their murder mystery because her boyfriend is the one that's missing. So she's investigating his disappearance, and they start working together on the case, trying to figure out what's going on, and it leads to, turns out that, not turns out like a spoiler, but just turns out that the whole situation is more supernatural and more connected to their family histories than either of the girls knows. And it's really good. I'm here for the vibes. The cover is fantastic. It just delivers on, it delivers on everything that it promises, and it's so rare for a book to do that, right? So I highly recommend this one, especially for the time of year. I can see myself reading this one again, especially maybe like make it a yearly read in October, because I really enjoyed it. It was fairly short, easy to read. Highly recommend it. And I kind of diverged a little bit. I diverged off my spooky list. The problem was that I didn't have a lot of the books on my spooky TBR, and I didn't have the money to get them this month either, so I just had to read like what I had. And one of those would be Ancillary Justice by Leckie. Now, this is the first book in a very popular sci-fi trilogy that is complete, which is cool. And it was sort of advertised to me as like Sapphic sci-fi, LGBTQ sci-fi, which I'm always on the lookout for. And I can see why it was marketed to me that way. However, when going into it with that mindset and that expectation, I came out disappointed on that front, because the deal with this book is that the main character is actually an AI for a warship in this particular world. So like a big, massive warship, right? But she's been trapped or banished or exiled or however you want to say it into this one tiny human body. So it's this massive AI crammed into just a teeny tiny normal human. And given that, the main character doesn't necessarily have gender or sexuality or anything like that because they're an AI. So they don't really identify as female or anything else. And also, in the particular society that we're dealing with, or the main society we deal with in this book, they use pronouns differently, which is to say the only pronoun they use is the she, her pronoun, regardless of biological sex. And this doesn't necessarily mean that everyone in that society is identifying as female. It's just it's a language quirk more than anything else. So I think to call it Sapphic is a bit of a tease, because technically in the language they're both being referred to by a female pronoun, but they're not identifying that way in any meaningful way. So just go in with that in mind, that the Sapphic or the queer elements aren't going to be a heavy thing in this trilogy, or at least not in this first book. I'd also like to say that I read this on audiobook, and I would recommend reading it on physical copy or digital instead of audiobook, because even though the narrating was really good and the performance was fine, I was confused for most of this book. And that happens to me sometimes when I'm reading audiobooks, especially like really big world-building audiobooks like sci-fi and fantasy, just because a lot of it gets lost and I can't always pay attention as much as maybe I should be able to. And just given a lot of the back and forth with the time stuff and the gender stuff in this book, by gender stuff I mean the pronouns, it was kind of hard to keep up with what was going on or who was who. And it took me a while to understand what they were doing with the pronouns, so I was confused as to where all the men were, because there are men, you just don't use he, him for them. So yeah, I would recommend you reading it on a physical copy. I ended up really enjoying this book despite being confused for a large chunk of it. The ending kind of won me over. So I've considered maybe going back and rereading this in a physical copy just to get the full effect before continuing on with the series, which I definitely want to do because, like I said, I ended up enjoying it. So I will continue. I may reread this one. We'll just have to see. What else can I say? I came out of it with a positive view despite feeling slightly misled and despite being confused. A History of What Comes Next, which is a fairly recent release from this year, by the same author of the Themis Files, which if you guys know me at all, you know that that's like one of my favorite sci-fi series ever. The Themis Files, so that would be the first book is Sleeping Giants, and then Waking Gods and Only Human. And that's a trilogy that I absolutely adore, and it's turning out that I just love this author whose name I still can't pronounce, which is sad. I think it's Sylvain Neuvel, maybe? I'm not sure. I'll put it on the screen just so you guys know. But this is a history of what comes next, so it's his newer book. It's separate from the Famous Files, but it still has all those vibes, and I just love his writing style. It's so different. It's so unique, and it might annoy some people, and I totally understand. If it does, that's okay. But for me, I love it. I love it. It's exciting. It's immersive. And he carries that over into this book, which I'm not going to get too far into the plot necessarily, but let me just say, I don't go for World War II stuff. I'm sick of it. I don't want to hear about World War II. I don't want to hear about Nazis. I don't want to hear about the Holocaust. I'm tired of it. There's too much. It's overwhelming, the amount of World War II stories. But this is a World War II story. It takes place not entirely in World War II, but that's where it begins at the very least. But it focuses on like scientific spies that are involved in the rocketry programs, space programs, weapon programs, and stuff like that. So it's a lot of science involved. As with Famous Files, it's obviously a passion for the author to write about scientific things. And that's something I love to read about too, personally. So it's about a spy, a mother-daughter. I'm what I'm going to say. So it's about a mother-daughter pair of spies that are infiltrating the rocketry programs of different countries in order to accelerate the process of people getting into space. That's all I'm going to say. There's more to it, obviously, but that's all I'm going to say. I highly recommend it. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to say that if you like the Famous Files, if you like that style of writing, read this because you're probably going to love it too. I gave it, I don't star rate things. I don't know. I really liked it. It's one of my favorite books I read this year, actually, which took me by surprise. So that's all I'm going to say. Highly recommend A History of What Comes Next. Also highly recommend the Famous Files if you haven't read those already. This Body's Not Big Enough for Both of Us, and that is by Edgar Cantero, who you may remember is the author of Meddling Kids. Yeah, I made this t-shirt. I'm really proud of it. But yes, Meddling Kids, which I read last month in September and loved. That was it's one of my new favorite books ever. And this is by the same author. It's called This Body's Not Big Enough for the Both of Us. And this author, he's just so wacky. He comes up with really weird stuff. This is another really weird thing. It's about a person. Okay, no. It's about two people, siblings, who have to inhabit and share the same body. Or they do. They have inhabited and shared the same body their entire lives. And they are a private detective, or they are private detectives together, the two of them, as a team. And it's wacky and short and weird, and I really liked it. It was this little spoof at the bottom. It says, a goofy, psycho comic romp and winking, self-aware parody of Detective Noir. It's got that Noir, I hate the way that word is, Noir vibe. Detective story, mafia. They're investigating a death within the mob, and it's super cool. It's just fun to read. This guy's writing style is really wacky, and he likes to play with format, and he likes to play some pages or some scenes he'll write it's a movie script, and then other times he'll hop to the points of view of inanimate objects, and it's wacky, it's weird. It's just sort of you have to go with it kind of thing. And the concept was just incredible. But I really liked it. It was fun. I will probably keep following this author and reading what they put out just because I've loved those two books so much. And I recommend it. It's fun. Not spooky necessarily. It didn't fit with my spooky vibe, even though it is technically a murder mystery. It was way more of a detective mob story than anything else. So, yep. Enjoy. It's a pretty cool cover too. A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. It's a fairly short book. This is just the dust cover. It's fairly short, but I started reading it at the beginning of October, and I was like, not right now, because it's not spooky. It's fall. It's very fall, but not spooky. So I set it back down, and then I just picked it up yesterday again. I could probably read it in one sitting if I could just focus, because it is so short. So I'm hoping I'll finish that in November, I'm sure, maybe in the next week or so. And then also, on audiobook, I've just kind of been in a sci-fi mood despite myself. On audiobook, I finally started Seven Devils, which is a sci-fi, epic, Sapphic, YA book that I've had my eye on for a while. I was just waiting for it to go on sale, and it finally did. So that's what I'm reading on audiobook right now. And then I'm reading Song for the Wild Bill in physical. I'm not gonna do like a November TBR just because I can't buy any more books right now, and there are so many books that I was supposed to read this year, or that I had planned on reading this year, that I didn't get around to. So right now my main focus is going to be just on catching up, right? So just reading books that I already own but haven't finished yet. So without further ado, I think I'm going to call it for this video and then hop onto a end of the year tag video and just do that separately. And I'll talk a little bit more about my plan for the next 2 months in that video. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you guys had a great October. Hope you had a great spooky season in general. Great Halloween. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.